All right, great. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin O'Leary, Director of Marketing at the Preservation Society of Newport County, and today we go inside the Newport Mansions with art crime expert Geoff Kelly. Geoff is a retired FBI agent with more than 30 years of state and federal law enforcement experience. As one of the original members of the FBI's art crime team, he managed numerous high profile cases and recovered more than $100 million in stolen artwork and cultural property. He solved the largest residential art burglary in history, resulting in the recovery of all the artwork, including Cézanne's Picture and Fruit, 20 years after it was stolen. An internationally recognized expert, he has trained agencies and institutions around the world on best practices to prevent art and cultural property theft. Geoff also investigated the 1990 theft at the, wait for it, Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, considered the heist of the century, and he worked on the case for 22 years before retiring from the FBI in 2024. He's currently a partner in Argus Cultural Property Consultants, specializing in protecting fine art and antiquities. And he's got a book coming out on the Gardner theft entitled 13 Perfect Fugitives: The True Story of the Mob, Murder, and the World's Largest Art Heist. And he'll be joining us to speak about the case on March 19th at Rosecliff Mansion. So, Geoff, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Kevin. Unfortunately, we're out of time now. So,
Yeah, I know. Hey, we
well,
just we slather it on before the real difficult
we
questions
got about a
come in.
minute left. So
I
let's
warned
wrap
you.
it up.
So, I want to say to our listeners, on this interview, you are going to announce who actually stole all that art from the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum, right?
Um, you're gonna have to buy the book for that, but yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so let me start off by a lot of people in the public think that art thieves, when they think of art thieves, they're thinking of like, I mean, not that Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible was an art thief, but they think of like Catherine Zeta-Jones snaking through a laser security system, like in the movie Entrapment. But the recent heist at the Louvre shows it can be pretty bare bones. It's not super science fiction, for lack of a better description. Is the grab and dash scenario we saw in Paris common? I mean, it was so bold that it left a lot of people sort of scratching our heads and ran counter to what, I think, me included, what we thought a high-end art heist entails. I mean, these guys essentially went up on a ladder, like broke a window and stole a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we all love the Hollywood paradigm, and the Catherine Zeta-Jones who's vaulting over very visible laser beams. I don't know what purpose that's going to serve a museum when they're actually visible, but no, that's what everybody thinks about. You think of the Thomas Crown affair and
Right.
rappelling through skylights, and that's really not the reality. Um, about 80% of all museum thefts in the United States are internal. They're insider jobs, someone
Oh,
in a
okay.
position of trust, or an employee. And so the remaining 20% of museum burglaries are typically what we call the smash and grab, just like we saw in the Louvre. Somebody comes in, either overpowers a guard or pushes right past the guard, takes objects off the gallery walls, and they're gone within minutes. And they're they're robberies. Let's be
Yeah.
clear. They're not.
Yeah.
We use the term heist because it sounds more rarefied when you're
Sure.
talking about the art world, but it's a robbery, and the individuals that do these types of robberies are the same guys who would just go out and rob a bank or go steal a car. They're not art connoisseurs, and
Right.
we've seen a shift in the traditional art heist
Hmm.
over recent years, where thieves are getting away from stealing artwork because it is so recognizable. It's so easily identifiable. And now, when everybody has a smartphone and you can aim your smartphone at a piece of artwork, and it'll tell you instantly whether or not it's stolen, whether it appears in any stolen art and cultural
Oh,
property
interesting.
databases. Yeah, I mean it's very difficult. It was difficult 30 years ago to monetize stolen artwork. Now it's virtually impossible. So you're seeing kind of a sea change where thieves are focusing now on jewelry. Uh,
Right.
we saw it in Dresden with the Green Vault robbery in 2019. We saw it dramatically play out in the Louvre robbery last October,
Hmm.
because there is a market for that. You can break up these jewels and melt down the settings and recut the gems for a tremendously reduced value.
Sure.
But it is a viable robbery technique, and it's really the only one that's profitable.
Right.
You
So I
know,
guess that sort of lens, I mean, how much, I don't know if there's a stat, but how much of these notable heists is the motivation? Are these thieves for hire from reclusive, billionaires who want to own something and just keep it to themselves? Or is it sort of like what you were talking about? People going in, the gemstones are worth a lot of money. They kind of melt it down. They know that the end result is going to be pennies on the dollar, but you're still talking about millions of dollars.
yeah, exactly. When you're talking about $100 million worth of gems stolen from the Louvre, even if they can only get 10 cents on the dollar, that's a really good haul. Uh,
Right.
I said it back then. I was interviewed a number of times, and I continue to maintain that if these guys are smart robbers, not art thieves, but smart robbers, they're going to hold on to those pieces for a period of time before they break them down,
Right.
just in case they get caught. And then I think we've seen already 4 individuals are in custody as a result of the Louvre robbery. So
Right.
I think I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that the pieces haven't been cut down. But
Hmm.
again, you mentioned Hollywood at the beginning of the interview, and it's a prevalent theme that runs through the topic of art theft. And
Yeah.
there is no doctor now. That's the theory of the mad, the reclusive billionaire, as you mentioned, who's got this illicit art collection hidden from view. It just doesn't exist. And I say that confidently because we've yet to have any reclusive billionaire die, and then when people are going through his home, that they come upon this illicit art collection.
Right.
It's
Right.
uh, people steal art for investment potential, or because they want to show off, but it's
Sure.
investment is really the main reason why people steal artwork. And so
Right.
uh, the Dr. No theory, while titillating, is really not what we see in reality.
Right, not zipping down on wires in a black suit, looking really buff and just
Yeah.
popping through lasers.
Exactly. It's
You totally burst, Jeff. You totally burst my bubble. I'll never watch
sorry.
another robbery on screen
I'm
again.
sorry. It's just not as exciting as it is in the Hollywood.
So let me ask you this: the Louvre, and and I'm sitting within the campus of an historic museum, heritage museum. I would assume that, and the Louvre announced that they were adding, I don't know, 100 more perimeter cameras, and they were ramping up their security. And I can only imagine that some of the biggest museums worldwide are, if they haven't already, doing a sort of security audit of their own
Absolutely.
systems. What precludes new system installation in historic buildings? And are there real challenges other than just hubris, thinking that nobody would dare breach our walls and steal our treasures?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's hubris, Kevin. I mean, there are really practical limitations when you're talking about retrofitting a security system to a facility that is in and of itself a piece of art.
Yeah.
And it's difficult when museums in the last 20 years have been real dramatic changes in security systems that all really
Mhm.
came about after 9/11. And in the
Right.
old days of having to run coaxial cable through the walls and through the ceiling, and when you think of a museum like the Louvre, that is one giant piece of artwork in and of itself. And
Right.
drilling into 17th century paneling or coming in through the ceiling, yeah, it's not palatable and it's really not practical. But today, the technology has advanced so much over the last two
Sure.
decades, and you're talking about wireless cameras, and you're talking about AI assisted CCTV, and it's really moved so much further down the road
Hmm.
And I don't think it's hubris, but I think to be honest with you, I think a lot of museum directors think, wow, we put this security system in 20 years ago and it cost $100,000. I can't even imagine what it costs now.
Right.
But that same security director probably has a Ring camera at home that he or she bought on Amazon for 100
That's
bucks.
right. Yeah.
And it's like, hey, no, that same technology
Sure.
can be used in your museum and it can be very minimally intrusive
Right.
and for a fraction of the cost than it was 20 years ago. And the cameras today, and I'm certainly going beyond store bought off the shelf Ring cameras, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the camera systems today with the AI enhancement are just taking museum security to another level because now
Hmm.
you have instead of having a passive CCTV system where you have to have a human being monitoring, you're talking about 100 camera monitoring 100 camera additional cameras to see if
Right.
anything looks amiss. You have AI technology now, and it's
Yeah.
proactive. And the AI technology for very short money is able to monitor 100, 1,000 cameras and
Right.
look for anomalies, look for something that doesn't seem right. Is this individual loitering too much in this one particular gallery? Right?
Hmm.
Is it
Hmm.
because it's constantly learning, and it's
Right.
taking what it's learned to become a better security system. And
So
this
interesting.
is what 99 people do when they come to the museum. There's nothing nefarious about pausing and contemplating artwork or sitting here in
Sure.
quiet reflection. No, but it's finding this one guy is doing something that all the other people are not doing, and it's constantly learning, and it's in effect making the whole system better, and it's
Right.
taking away the need to have security officers constantly manning this massive complex of cameras to look for that one guy that stands out.
Right. Right. I mean, so not to dwell on the Louvre too much, but I want to ask this one question, Jeff. When you saw the heist at the Louvre, were you surprised? I think, there was so much has been written about the fact that, these guys basically pulled up in a truck, extended a ladder, and like hopped through the window and took a bunch of jewels. Were you surprised, or was that sort of an indicator species that some of these cultural institutions aren't as secure as they thought, or it's lacks security, or how did you read that?
I was surprised. I'm going to be
Okay.
candid with you. Yeah, I mean, there's all museums by their very definition as aesthetic institutions for learning.
Mhm.
People don't want to go to a museum and go through like TSA level security, right? And
Right.
nobody they and
I don't want to do it at the airport.
right. And but I think it's an attitude that a lot of museums have that they really need to change it because let's face it, the public is used to this.
Right.
We go to the airports, and you want to go to a sporting event and you've got to go through the magnetometers, and you can't bring in a bag unless it's clear plastic, and there's all these parameters, and even going to schools you've got to show ID. We have come to kind of accept that in our everyday life, and I think
Hmm.
there has to be on for the museum directors there has to be a willingness to kind of up it a little bit for the sake for the security of the collection, and not just for theft,
Yeah.
but also for vandalism, which when you look at climate activism, it's a serious issue to keep the collections from being damaged, not
Yeah.
just stolen. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, the Louvre, I was surprised, to be honest with you, because it's the Louvre, right? And I, figured that their security system and not just the hardware, but the
Right.
personnel would be such that if somebody pulled up in a ladder truck, they would pounce on them immediately. And so I
Right.
was surprised that they were able to get away with it. But
I mean, were they again? Okay, I lied. One more question about the Louvre. I mean, were they brilliant? Were they audacious, or did they just not know any better? Were they
no,
just thugs thinking, "Let's take a flyer on this"?
yeah, no, it's an audacious plan, and that's unfortunately for so many museums around this country. If somebody's willing to barge in, whether through the front door, going up a ladder, and
Yeah.
grab objects off the wall or smash vitrines and steal them out of display cases, you're probably going to get away with it. I hate to say that, but museum
Right.
security guards, for the most part, are not armed, and their job is not to engage with thieves. That's not their role in a museum environment. They're not trained to do that, and
Right.
certainly nobody wants a shootout in a museum gallery
Hmm.
over artwork, as valuable as it may be. So yeah, it's so if somebody's willing to do it, then they're probably going to get away with it, at least in the short term. And as we saw with the Louvre, they left behind evidence which apparently led to their identification through DNA analysis. They were picked up
Right.
on surveillance cameras, even though that camera that was supposed to be pointed at that window apparently was pointing away. And I don't know if that's what was in the media, and I don't have any inside
Right.
baseball. I don't know if it was intentionally moved or if it's a what we call a PZT camera, pan zoom tilt, that just happened to be making its rounds and they got lucky.
Sure.
Right? But they got caught.
Yeah.
And so, it's not it's audacious, but it's not particularly well thought out.
Right. Right. You've said in the past that stolen art is either recovered immediately or very soon or not for generations. Right.
Yeah.
And so, these guys at the Louvre I don't know if there was a woman involved, but they were caught, but the artifacts that they took are still missing. So why is it like kind of one or the other?
So I would be very surprised if, um, based on these very quick arrests of four subjects, that there is not a recovery, or that there hasn't already been a recovery and they're just not publicizing it. You know, it would be surprising to me if these stolen pieces do not come back, given the fact that
Right.
we have four people in custody, and I'm sure there's going to be many, many more.
Right.
So that's one end of the recovery spectrum. Uh, the pieces come back, hopefully within a day, within a few months, maybe a year, as the police continue their investigation. I
Hmm.
mentioned that we had the Dresden Green Vault robbery in 2019. About $100 million in gems were stolen. They were all but one piece was recovered in 2022, 3 years later. They hadn't been melted down, they hadn't been broken up at that point. If you don't see it in the short term, then it's going to be generational. Then it's going to be you get past the point of somebody's using it. Somebody realizes they can't sell it, they can't monetize it. Uh, they end up not getting locked up on something else, and they can use it as a bargaining chip. And the
Right.
artwork, the cultural property, just kind of sits. And
Hmm.
now you're going to talk generational, and now it's going to be
Right.
somebody's going through their dad's, their recently deceased father's attic, or a safe deposit box is opened, or they're cleaning out the basement, and that's how recoveries are made. Or now that everybody was
Not
afraid of
my
this guy.
family.
Yeah, but you never know. You never know, Kevin.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Not my family,
Yeah, but
unfortunately.
yeah, but so there was somebody dies, and there were a lot of people who were afraid of this person, and now there's
Sure.
people who are like, oh, now I can tell you what I didn't want to say when he was alive. So that's how you get a generational aspect. The other end.
Got it. Yeah, and Jay, it seems like tracing stolen artwork is sort of like forensic accounting, right? You're combing through fragments of information and try to thread it all together to kind of put together a trail. How do you do it when the physical evidence could be decades old?
Yeah, look, it's really difficult. You know, I got the Gardner Museum heist investigation in 2002. I had that for 22 years up until my retirement. And talking, no agent wants to get a cold case.
Right.
You don't want a case where all the leads are dead and a lot of the suspects and witnesses are dead as well, right? You
Mhm.
want something that's really you want to be there from the beginning. You want to take an investigation from the cradle to the grave. And so when you end up with an investigation that's moribund, like the Gardner was, it's really difficult to try and piece it together from scratch. And in the case of the Gardner, my predecessor sadly was killed in a car accident and he was deceased. And so I didn't have the opportunity to ask him the questions that that are not going to be in the file, right?
Right.
The FBI is all about facts, just the facts, ma'am, right? And
Right.
our our files don't contain opinions, they don't contain suppositions, they contain facts. And without being able to go out for coffee with my predecessor and say, okay, that's what's in the case file, but tell me, what do you think? It
Right.
becomes very difficult, and having to stumble upon things all over again, right?
Yeah.
And makes it very difficult to work a cold case. And you just really want people, you want witnesses, you want somebody
Hmm.
who knows something. And in the Gardner case, I was very fortunate that towards like 2008, 2009, it really started to gain momentum because I started finding people who really did have stuff to tell.
Right.
And when you're working art theft cases, it's difficult because like when you art theft cases encompass the whole spectrum of criminality.
Hmm.
People think of like the rarefied, like the Thomas Crown affair, right? But you're talking about money laundering, terrorism financing, drug trafficking, extortion, mail frauds. Like it touches upon all of the crime problems that we face in this country. And so when I can't tell you how many times I would go interview somebody who hadn't been interviewed in 20 years and ask them about the artwork, and they'd voluntarily provide very important information. And I'd say, well, why didn't you tell anybody this before? And the response was uniformly like, well, I didn't think anybody cared. It was just some old paintings. They didn't know the importance of it. They didn't know that it was the Gardner painting.
Wow.
They just saw some guy with some old paintings. And that's one of the difficult things because, it's a homicide or it's a kilos of cocaine or,
Right.
suitcases filled with cash. Everybody knows that's important, but just some old dusty paintings, it
Sure.
doesn't resonate with people who are not part of that art community.
I mean, is that what it looks like when you're talking about a case as old as Isabella Stewart and you drop into it, maybe a decade or more after the initial investigation had happened? I mean, not to go into too much detail because we'd be here for hours, but is it you just I imagine that you drop in the first day, you're just unboxing tens of thousands of documents. Do you go through and do an audit of all of that and try to find holes? Like where do you even start with something like that?
Start with serial one of volume one. It's the very first document. And
That's a
when
long book.
oh yeah, it's tremendous, right? The robbery happened on March 18th of 1990, and for the first 5 years of the pendency of the investigation, all the FBI files were still in paper form. They hadn't computerized. The
Wow.
FBI started to go to a computerized database in the mid 90s, but those first 5 years were literally the old paper file jackets. And so
You didn't have a chance to fire up the microfilm machine
no,
at all? They didn't have that?
no, it never had microfilm. Uh,
What's it
that
called?
would have
Microfiche?
microfiche, microfilm. It would have been
Right.
better, but yeah. So I had to start from scratch and literally pull the first volume and go to the first document, which is in the FBI we call them serials. So I went to
Wow.
serial one of volume one and just started reading. And I had a stack of sticky notes, post-its, different colors, and the different colors. I kind of came up with this color coding, but based on importance and whatnot. And I would just sit there and stick sticky notes and take
Oh
notes,
my
just
gosh.
go through. And it took months
I bet.
to go through the case file to get up to speed. And so I kind of learned about the case like I was reading a really, really long, oftentimes boring novel,
Sure.
and
Tell me about
eventually,
was there a did you tell me about your first kind of aha moment? Because I'm assuming as you go through, you're obviously looking for something, right? You're looking for something new, or you're looking for a hole to fill, or however you want to describe it. Tell me about if you can remember. What was your first as you're going through all these files, whether it was, hey, they didn't talk to this person or they didn't ask this question. Do you remember kind of an aha moment where I imagine, and this is coming from movies, which we just talked about, you're sort of going through, there's hours and hours of like, okay, okay, okay. And then all of a sudden, like, wait a second. Tell me about, did you have one of those moments where it was like, well, wait a second, here's an opportunity to really like peel back another layer of this onion?
yeah, I had a lot of those moments. The first, very shortly into the case review, was the guard, Rick Abbott, the guard who
Right.
went to the museum. I mean, um, I talk about it in my book that uh, he was like a Scooby Doo suspect. Scooby. You watch an episode of Scooby Doo. He wasn't an Agatha Christie suspect. He wasn't. He wasn't. There was no finely honed sense of tension in this.
That's funny.
He was the Scooby Doo suspect. He was introduced in the first minute of the episode, and that was Rick Abbott. He was a Scooby Doo suspect. Right.
Wow.
The only one that went into the Blue Room Gallery, which is where one of the stolen pieces was taken, the Manet Chez Tortoni. Uh, we know from the motion sensors that the suspects never went into that gallery, and that was kind of the first aha moment. And
Yeah.
then it was another tremendous aha moment because we had a description of the vehicle that the subjects drove up to the museum in, kind of an esoteric vehicle. It's a Dodge Daytona hatchback, kind of like a sports car, not what you would want to expect to see police officers sitting in, but they were
Right.
seen in that vehicle. And it was really an aha moment when one of the suspects, whose name had come up in the past, and I saw that I pulled his criminal history again, and he'd been arrested for operating under the influence 4 months before the robbery. So I pulled from Boston Police Department his old arrest report, which came
Hmm.
on the old microfiche, that old blotchy paper. And it
Yep.
turns out that the night he was arrested, 4 months before the robbery, he was driving the identical vehicle, a Dodge Daytona.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's an aha moment.
that was an aha moment right there. And
For
there were
sure.
quite a number of other aha moments. It was,
Sure.
for a case as long and drawn out as the Gardner, it was really surprising to me how many really exciting moments there were. And then it turned
Right.
into so much more. I mean, as the investigation started going and we identified an individual in Connecticut, Bobby Gentile, who we believe had some of the paintings at some point,
Hmm.
we ended up doing informant doing drug buys, and we executed 3 search warrants at his house, and we introduced an undercover FBI agent, and like it really just turned into a really exciting case.
Yeah.
It had everything except the recovery of the paintings,
Right.
everything else, but it was still pretty fascinating to work
Yeah.
through.
Well, I mean, it continues to captivate and capture the imagination of everybody. I mean, not just people who are art aficionados or people from Boston or the Northeast or what have you. It's just, it's incredible. Let me switch, Jeff, let me switch gears for one sec. You recently recovered some items looted from Okinawa during World War II. Like what sparked that recovery? What's the context there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's thank you. You just allowed me the perfect opportunity to segue back to what we talked about art recoveries being generational.
Yeah.
This was an individual in Massachusetts. He was a World War II veteran. He died. His family was going through his house, and they came upon these 22 artifacts. It appeared Asian, an old map, and some old scrolls. And they reached out to the FBI, and because I was on the art crime team, I got the call. And I went out there, and it was just tremendous to see these pieces. And they voluntarily surrendered them. The family was great. Their father was not the one who looted these objects from Okinawa because he was never in the Pacific Theater, but he had acquired them over the years. And to to go into the FBI has what's called the National Stolen Art File. It's our database of
Hmm.
stolen art and cultural property. And these items had been entered. Some of these items had been entered into the database uh, back in 2000, uh, and you had these old black and white photographs. That's all that existed of these old scrolls. And to be able to see them in person in bright color, even though they were faded and somewhat damaged, to now be able to make a side by side comparison and to actually see them, not just a photograph, is really it's definitely like an Indiana Jones moment.
Yeah.
And so here we were able to make a repatriation to the people of Okinawa, 80 years after these items of incredible cultural value, we were able to return them. And uh, some of these were the only known images of these Ryukyu kings of Okinawa, and
Hmm.
to return them was tremendous. And I was able to do that uh, the last week before I retired.
Wow.
That was kind of like a drop the mic moment for me,
Yeah.
was to say goodbye and with that recovery.
Right. I mean, not to minimize the value of those artifacts that you recovered, but have you worked on a case like that before where there has been a heist? Maybe they're not Manets or John Singer Sargents or what have you, but there was a heist of some sort, and the people who ended up with some of the items were just unknowing buyers. I mean, there must be a whole underground out there
Yeah,
for just beautiful objects and beautiful art, maybe not from world famous artists or paintings that are worth millions, but I'm assuming there's a whole black market out there for people who are looking for beautiful artwork or decorative arts, and they may be purchasing looted items and not even know it.
oh, absolutely. It happens quite often. I
Okay.
had a couple of recoveries the last year before I retired of important works of art that had been stolen,
Hmm.
and they changed hands a number of times. And in fact, I had one. It had been stolen from a club in Chicago and was sold on at a very prestigious Newbury Street gallery in Boston back in the 80s. And this came to light when the owner consigned it to an auction house, and uh, the auction house realized as they were doing their due diligence on the piece that it was actually a stolen artwork. Um, and it brings into so many difficult questions when you're talking about possession of stolen property when you're an innocent um, purchaser of it.
Yeah.
In some countries, if you purchase in good faith stolen property, you have the primary right to it. In some countries, if it changes hands two times, then the third possessor has the legal right to it. That's not the
Wow.
case here in the United States. And the property laws here in the United States are very clear. You
Hmm.
can never have clear title to stolen property, period. The victim, however many years ago, still has primary right to that stolen property.
Right.
And so in these situations, I've had to tell uh, people who purchase this artwork for fair market value and they have all the receipts and that hey that doesn't belong to you. And you know the worst case scenario is we end up going through the United States Attorney's Office and getting a seizure warrant, and we actually take it, seize the property.
Hmm.
Uh, but I've always tried to be a mediator in these situations. And that's the situation with this artwork that was stolen from Chicago, was to get both parties together, and
Right.
that's not my role, but by doing that in conjunction with a civil assistant United States attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and be like, hey, look, let's try and figure something out, right? So we can
Right. It must be
everybody
emotional.
everybody walks away feeling like they got something out of it.
Sure.
And in the end of this, the consigner of that stolen piece of artwork willingly gave it back. We didn't have to seize it, and everybody wins in that situation. But
Right.
it's difficult, and there's no easy answers for it.
Yeah, and I'm sure people whoever purchased it, I mean, if you're going to be spending, assuming, let's just say, a lot of money on a piece of art, that's an emotional decision, right? I mean, that's not, I mean, some people are investors and it's kind of black and white. They may not be aficionados, but I'm assuming some of the people that you're talking about, you're dealing with some pretty heady emotions and not just on the investment end. You know, it's not just simply, I spent X dollars and where's my money? It's they purchased that painting or artifact because it meant something to them.
Yeah, and again, we're always when we talk about artwork, we're always thinking of fine art, but it's
Right.
also cultural patrimony and cultural
Sure.
artifacts that are. We see this so much here in the United States, where people are purchasing Native American artifacts, and they're purchasing them through legitimate venues, whether it's some online marketplace or from an auction house. But
Yeah.
there are laws in the United States, in North American Graves Repatriation Act and ARPA, that there are laws that are in place
Hmm.
specifically to prevent the sale of specific Native American artifacts, like
Right.
funerary objects and items of cultural patrimony. And
Right.
understandably, the Native American tribes want those items back. They were taken from them, whether it was through illegal looting or through just kind of ambivalence by
Sure.
in our past. But those are their items of cultural patrimony, and they want them back. They want,
Yeah.
them back where they belong, and to reinter them. So yeah, it brings up so many issues when you're talking about possessing property, stolen artwork, and cultural property. Um,
Right.
Making sure
Je-
that it's done correctly.
Yeah. Jeff, you just mentioned, like an auction house, right? They do their due diligence to identify if a piece of art is stolen or it has some sort of suspicious provenance or it's a fake or what have you is, how much of the how many of the heists, let's say just in this country, is there an incentive to traffic those stolen goods outside of the US? I mean, you just mentioned that in some countries, if you're the second or third purchaser, then you are the legal owner, guardian of that piece. So I'm just sort of making a leap here that I'm assuming that there are safeguards, there is due diligence in certain areas where people can validate the authenticity or the legality of a certain piece. I'm assuming there's incentive for some of these heists to get these pieces outside the US and traffic them in countries where there aren't those safeguards.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point, Kevin. But the U.S. is the major consumer for stolen property. It seems to end up here.
Yay.
It is what it is. But yeah, it's there. While there would be an incentive, you're talking about a logistical issue, and
Right.
due diligence really is a worldwide issue. Like in London, there's the Art Loss Register, which is basically any major gallery or auction house is going to run their entire catalog prior to the auction. They're going to run it through the Art Loss Register because
Yeah.
they have this
Yeah.
massive database of stolen art and cultural property. So even if they're able to deal with the logistics of getting it outside of the country and getting it into another country, they're still going to be faced with the same issues of trying to find a buyer.
Sure. And when people are saying the last question about sort of like these heists, do they, we were talking about how sometimes if there's precious jewels or whatever, they're melting them down and sort of selling them for pennies on the dollar, which still represents a ton of money. Um, but when a collection is being stolen, is it moved as a group? Is it immediately broken up? Is there a trend or it just depends?
It depends. It
Okay.
depends. I mean, certainly when we talk about the Gardner Museum heist, there were 13 objects that were taken.
Yeah.
Um, you know, my my best guess, and I hate to use the term guess, but for lack of a better term, I'll call it a guess, is that this these objects were broken up because through the years we've had confirmed sightings of some of the pieces.
Hmm.
Um, but to be honest with you, some of the other pieces have nobody's mentioned in since March 18th of 1990.
Right.
Which would lead us to believe that they went somewhere else. And oftentimes you see that when you're talking about a theft where there's multiple objects.
Yeah.
Everybody, there's no honor among thieves, and
Right.
any thief is loath to give his partners the entire collection of loot, and so it oftentimes it is distributed, parsed out so that everybody's got a little piece of the pie.
Yeah. Speaking of individual pieces, I read that you think the Manet was not on the original hit list at the Gardner. Can you explain that opinion? Or
Yeah,
why do you think that?
so going back to what I mentioned earlier about the subjects never went in the gallery which housed the Manet, which would right off the bat lead you to believe that it was kind of freelancing. Um, the subjects made a beeline for the Dutch Room Gallery,
Hmm.
and that's the gallery that housed all of the beautiful Dutch masters, right? I mean, Holbeins and Durer, and of course the Vermeer and the Rembrandts. So when you're looking at art theft in Massachusetts, Rembrandt is a name that resonates for decades, and
Sure.
it's like the Ferrari of the art world. Like you don't have to be much of an art lover, you don't have to be a connoisseur to have heard the name Rembrandt. And so it was, to me, in my opinion, it was no surprise that when these subjects got into the museum proper, they made a beeline for the Dutch room, and
Right.
the objects that they took from the Dutch Room Gallery. They took two large Rembrandts. They took a smaller Rembrandt sketch. They took a piece by Govard Flink called Landscape with an Obelisk that right up until a few years before the heist had been misattributed to Rembrandt. It was actually Flink was one of Rembrandt's pupils.
Hmm.
And they took a large Rembrandt self-portrait on panel, oil on panel, off the wall. And I think they overlooked it in the dark because it was the verso was out. It was leaning against
Right.
furniture, dark wood in the dark. I think they missed it. So out of the 13 items that were taken, you're talking about three Rembrandts, a fourth piece misattributed to Rembrandt, and a Rembrandt almost got stolen, right? So it was kind of like a Rembrandt shopping spree, and
All right,
the
Jeff,
menu doesn't fit on that.
we're coming up on some time, but I've got two more questions for you. I heard, and because it's the season, and I'm sitting in New England, I heard that you recovered Tom Brady's stolen Super Bowl jersey,
Yes, I
or
did.
multiple versions
Two
of.
jerseys, yeah, and Von Miller's Super Bowl 50 helmet, yeah.
What? Who took them? How'd they get them? Like what? What
So,
happened?
yeah, no, it was a crazy story, but I'd worked with the Patriots security for years on assisting them on items that had been stolen and whatnot.
Yep.
When Super Bowl 51 occurred, they reached out to me. We started an investigation, and it really wasn't too hard to figure this one out, to be honest with you. I mean, we looked
Right.
at surveillance videos, and it was very clear that there was a guy who kind of, according to Tom Brady, kind of stood out like a sore thumb, who was in the locker room. He'd um, just walked right up behind Nate Ebner, walking up the tunnel from the field after the Super Bowl, and he looked like he belonged. He had a suit on, and he had credentials that were partially obscured by his tie. And so, that's a warning to anybody who's working security that just because somebody looks like they belong, they may not. So we were
Right.
able to trace them down to Mexico City. My partner and I went down there a month later and brought them back. And the individual who allegedly stole these pieces, he also had Tom Brady's Super Bowl 49 jersey and Von Miller's helmet from Super Bowl 50.
Wow.
He gave his apologies, and we were able to get them back and give them.
No AI required.
No way required. And this is the thing. It's hard to get away with these things with all the
That's right.
security that's out there.
Anyway, well, Jeff, I mean, this has been really fascinating. I could talk for another couple of hours, and maybe we'll, if you're available, we would love to have you back and continue this. I've got a whole bunch of questions that I didn't get to, but I just want to remind the listeners out there to go check out Jeff's book, 13 Perfect Fugitives. The Isabella Stewart Gardner heist continues to capture. I don't even know. Has a movie been made about this? And who's playing
Not
you in the movie?
yet. Yeah, we haven't gotten that far, but I think honestly, I think it would make a great movie. It's
Yeah,
a fascinating case. It really is. So many twists and turns. So
incredible. Anyway, 13 Perfect Fugitives by Geoff Kelly. Go check out that book. Jeff, thanks so much for your time. Really enjoyed talking to you.
thanks so much, Kevin. I appreciate it.